This is the series where we compare everything to flagship. At this episode, the POCO X5 Pro versus a flagship. So in this video, we are going to run a couple of games on both these phones using the highest graphical settings and using the inbuilt FPS meter to see the performance of the phone. After that, we'll give you some stats and some personal opinions on how that experience was. Before all of that, on the screen you will find the specs of each of these phones. Again, the POCO X5 Pro is running on a mid-range Snapdragon processor, while the S23 Ultra is running on the latest Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 processor, custom-made for the Samsung phone. So let's start with the waifu simulator. So for transparency, both of these phones are on the highest possible graphics settings with 60 FPS enabled. The POCO manages to run the game at around 40 to 45 FPS while out in the open world, and in the Abyss dungeon, it can get closer to 50 FPS. But I did realize that in towns, when you're making a quick 180-degree turn, the frames drop to low 20s, and I assume that that's the phone trying to render what is behind that fast. While the S23 Ultra manages stable 60 FPS with very slight drops in frames during battles. But honestly, playing Genshin Impact at 40 frames and above is still a very enjoyable experience. Fluctuations are a bit annoying, but then again, normally you wouldn't want to play Genshin at these graphic settings because it can eat battery faster than Chrome can eat your RAM. Now for Asphalt 9. Again, max graphic settings with 60 FPS mode enabled. Both phones perform really well, maintaining the 60 FPS mark. On the POCO, there is very slight fluctuation, but it's not very noticeable. But I did realize that in a map I was playing in, when I got to a tunnel area, the frames dropped to around the 40 FPS mark, which is quite weird because nothing much is going on. So it could be a game optimization thing, or something is rendering out in the distance that is too much for the processor. The S23 Ultra did not have this problem. The game looks really good on either phone, but I realized that the anti-aliasing on the POCO was not as good as the S23 Ultra. This could be something under the hood that Asphalt has added to achieve the 60 FPS based on the hardware you are using. So the edges were quite jagged on the POCO, but when you are blasting down the road at more than 200 km per hour, it really doesn't matter much. Some of you might not know this game, but it perhaps has one of the best graphics I have ever seen in a mobile game, and so it made the list. This game has a high-performance 60 FPS mode and a high-quality 30 FPS mode. We thought it would be better to use the 60 FPS mode because it requires the phone to render nicer graphics at a higher frame rate. On the POCO, when I'm at the hub area, frames are stable at 60, and even in game, in smaller areas, it maintains the 60 FPS, but when it got to slightly more open areas, that's where it kind of struggles a bit, dropping to about 45 FPS, which is understandable, especially where in this map, there are dynamic clouds that are constantly being rendered. It is quite a chill game, and this FPS drop only happens in certain maps like this. The S23 Ultra is good, but there are changes in the frame rates when it's loading areas in the background. In the case of Sky, I think visually both are identical. Aside from the frame rate, it is also quite impressive on the POCO side. We also added a few other games and compiled it into this graph, so you can pause the video and take a look. Now, there is a lot of hype surrounding the performance of POCO phones, and if this video has taught you something, I think that it has shown the fact that a mid-range phone has come close to blurring the line between mid-range and flagship. So what do you think about its performance? Let me know in the comments below, and while you're there, don't forget to sub and like to this video, and I'll see you in the next one.